founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got John Livesay, who's known as the pitch whisperer. Yeah. And we're going to talk about whoever tells the best story wins. So this isn't just about telling stories, because we've kind of done that. This is about making sure that the story is memorable, because we all know that if say there's a whole bunch of pitches, one pitch, two pitch, three pitches, there's going to be a meeting after that. So when your prospects go into that meeting and they have that discussion, how are they going to make the decision? And that's why whoever tells the best story wins. John, it's so exciting to have you today. As I just said to you before we came on live, I've been looking forward to this all day.
Tim, you're very kind.
We've talked a number of times, and you are such an energy giver.
Thank you.
I come off. I could not sleep for 3 days. Come and talk to you, and still then go for another 3 days. You give so much energy.
I love it. I'm basically like a solar panel for your house.
You are. You're just so energetic. It's just so lovely. I love people like you that I come out with more energy than I go in. But John, it's not about me. I keep talking, and it should be you that's talking. Where can people find you?
The easiest place to find me is my website, John Livesay, L-I-V as in Victor, E-S-A-Y.com. And if you can't remember that, just Google the Pitch Whisperer, and all my content shows up there.
And I've done that, and it does. It's quite amazing. So John, first and foremost, how did you get into this?
Well, I used to sell advertising for Condé Nast, which is GQ and Wired and Vanity Fair and several brands like that. And I would call on big companies like Lexus, and they would say, we looked at 15 different titles. We've narrowed it down to 5. We're only going to pick 3. And you each get to come in for 30 minutes and pitch, and don't talk about numbers. Well, Tim, half of the reps were a deer in headlights. And I realized at that point that you needed to tell a story about why the magazine's editorial was the perfect psychographic for this particular launch, or what your marketing idea was that would make people excited to want to test drive the car. So that's really what started my journey on whoever told the best story is the one that's going to get the sale. Because as you so beautifully and eloquently described, when we pitch ourselves as a sales keynote speaker, oftentimes people find me, they watch my video, and then they want to interview me versus a couple other speakers. It all comes down to they buy our energy. And secondly, if they are hearing a pitch from architecture firms, law firms, financial services, whatever it is, a product, service, tech, they go, well, what'd you think? We heard 3 pitches. They all sound the same. I guess we should go with the cheapest. Yeah. But if you're the one that told the story that made them feel something, and more importantly, Tim, that they saw themselves in the story, you described something so close to their pain points, their life, their struggles, and you're the Sherpa helping them on that journey, then you're the one that's memorable and magnetic.
It's about getting that emotional connection, isn't it? And them seeing you. I'm like you when you're like me.
Yes. The big mistake I see a lot of people make when they think, okay, I'm going to tell a story, is they make themselves the hero. You're not the hero. You need to think of yourself like a Sherpa helping somebody climb Mount Everest, or Yoda in Star Wars. Your client is the hero. And so I can give an example if you think that would be helpful.
It would be very helpful, yes.
Yes. So I was working with Olympus Medical, the camera company that makes medical devices. And they said, we have this piece of equipment that makes surgeries go 30% faster. And we're not getting a lot of sales. And we don't understand why. It's so logical. And I said, there's no story. There's no emotional hook. So I asked them some questions, and we turned that fact into this case story instead of a case study. Imagine how happy Dr. Higgins was 6 months ago down at Long Beach Memorial using our equipment when he could go out to the patient's family an hour earlier than expected. And if you've ever waited for someone you love to come out of surgery, you know every minute feels like an hour. And he came out and said, good news, the scope shows they don't have cancer. They're going to be fine an hour early, and put them out of their waiting misery, and then turned to the rep and said, this is why I became a doctor, for moments like this. Now that rep tells that story to another doctor at another hospital who sees himself in it and often says, that's why I became a doctor. I want your equipment too. So there's the example of the client said, oh, that gives us chills. Not only are we not telling a story, it never occurred to us to make a patient's family a character in the story.
Yeah. It's fantastic. I love it. And I think it's I've seen the difference it can make in teaching salespeople stories rather than this robotic thing of saying, well, what they say, what all reps say, with a number one, with a upper quadrant, with a this, and people just glaze over.
They do. Numbers make us numb, don't they? Yes. It's like taking a cold shower. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And having that, having that where someone tells this story and then memorize, you then remember it as well, don't you?
Yes. And you can repeat it. You know, a good story should be 3 things. The 3 C's, I say: clear, concise, and compelling.
Yep.
If it's not clear and you're using a bunch of acronyms, you confuse people and they always say no because they won't even tell you they're confused. It needs to be concise so that what you just said, they can remember it. If it's too long, they're not going to remember it. And then finally, it needs to be compelling. We need to tug at those heartstrings to get people to feel something, because if the stakes aren't high in the story, we don't care. We don't remember it. So clear, concise, and compelling is your checklist. So when you're working on a story, I would encourage people, practice it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, and say, was this clear enough? Could it be more concise? And did it make you feel anything? Is it at all compelling?
So in terms of clarity, first thing, I guess, is to get rid of all the jargon and stuff, because this is about making it's got to be simple, hasn't it?
It really does. It's the old Einstein quote: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you're so in terms of the clarity, it has to, you need to have it clear. So when you're getting when someone pitches you, so when someone pitched to you that the idea that here's a medical device and it does things 30%, how do you break that down in your own mind to get the clarity in terms of the story?
Well, the first step, Tim, is to say, okay, what does 30% faster mean? Like, oh, well, an average surgery is 3 hours, 30% faster. We save an hour, it's 2 hours. Okay, so who benefits from that?
Yeah.
The doctor could maybe do another surgery, make more money. The hospital, I guess, could make more money. But I kept digging a little deeper. Where's the emotion, not just saving more money? And that's when I came up with the idea that the patient's family is really the ones that benefit the most from that surgery being an hour faster. Besides the patient, not being under anesthesia longer and all those things. And there's a 4-part structure to a great story. And so the exposition is the first part. The who, what, where, when. You really want to paint that picture in order to make people in the story. So you see, I described the doctor's name, how long ago, where it was. We have a sense of where we are. Then the second step is the problem. And again, those stakes have to be high. In this case, the patient's family. And I pull you into the story by saying, if you've ever had to wait for somebody, and even if you haven't, you can probably imagine it, or someone who had to wait. And then obviously the solution is the doctor comes out and says an hour early. But the real secret to any good story is the resolution. That dialogue in present tense that the doctor has with the rep. This is why I became a doctor. So most stories just stop at the solution. Imagine if The Wizard of Oz ended when Dorothy got in the balloon to go back to Kansas, the end. But no, there's that wonderful resolution where she's in bed. She's like, oh, there's no place like home. And you were there. And I appreciate everything so much. That's why that story is a classic. So if you want your story to be memorable and magnetic, make sure you have all 4 parts in your story, including that resolution.
I agree. It's a lovely piece, that because as you say, so many stories do stop because in a way, in our own heads, what we've done is that we've resolved. We're trying to get the story across as quickly as possible because we want to get back to telling people we're upper quadrant and with the and stuff like that. So, but that resolution piece is you're right. You pulled me in and then dropped that on me. It's fantastic. You got any more?
Yes, I do have another story. I was working with Honeywell. They make fans in operating rooms. And they were talking about how fast the fan went, speeds and particles and, very left brain number stuff again. And they were, people go, it's a fan, it's a commodity. We want the, And so I worked with them and I said, what happens if the fan doesn't work? Oh, well, the patient could get infected because they're being opened up and the fan needs to keep the room clean. And then I said 2 words that I would love everyone to now have in their toolbox, Tim. When you're asking people what the problems are, the challenges are, if you say these 2 words, anything else, you uncover more issues that other people won't because they just take the first problem that's presented. And they thought about it for a minute and they said, well, now that you mention it, the doctors and nurses are exposed to smoke because the lasers are cutting all day long. And if that fan isn't working properly, they could get secondhand smoke damage. That's the story, I said. And this is pre-pandemic. We need to tell this story to HR at the hospital, that this is a safety issue for the employees. And it's no longer something you're talking to the purchasing department about speeds and feeds. So once we crafted that story about how this fan keeps the doctors and nurses from getting secondhand smoke damage, and it's a safety issue for the employees, boom, they're telling a different story to a different person who becomes their internal brand ambassador.
It's lovely, and I love that. What was it you said? Anything else?
Anything else? Just 2 simple words. If when you go to a therapist, and let's say you're going to couples counseling, and you're like, the romance is gone. That's what's called the presenting problem. The therapist goes, okay, because the couple thinks as soon as we get the romance back, everything else will come back, and there's issues underneath that. Like there's trust or betrayal or resentment, something else is going on.
You leave your socks out,
yeah,
or something like that. Yeah.
Right. You're not listening, whatever it is. So we as salespeople need to think of ourselves as doctors, and we don't just take the first thing that somebody says is what their problem is. We dig a little deeper.
I need to write that down. So you've seen this in action, when you worked for the magazine company, and you've worked with other brands. What the thing that we need to, you do get across is the fact that it is about making it memorable, because it is so important that at that meeting that we have, or the meeting they have, they're going to remember it. And it kind of is echoing in their ears as they walk into that room, isn't it?
Beautifully said. Echoing in their ears. Yes. And I have another 2-word phrase I can give everybody.
Please.
So when I was selling advertising for Condé Nast in Los Angeles, Speedo, the swimsuit company, was in my territory. And I saw that they were coming out with a line of sportswear. And I went to them and I said, oh, would you consider advertising that in my fashion magazine? And they said, nope, we're going to be in a fitness magazine. And that could have been the end of the conversation. But I said 2 words here. What if? When you say what if, you open the conversation, you keep it going, you paint a different picture. I said, well, what if we treated the sportswear like it was high fashion and had a swimming model show around a swimming pool at a hotel, and Michael Phelps is on your payroll during the Olympics? What if he showed up? I bet we get a lot of publicity and sales than you would if you just advertised in the fitness world. They love the idea so much that I got the advertising. And for me, as a former lifeguard, I got to meet Michael Phelps at the event.
Wow.
And I went up to him and I said, Michael, everyone says that you're such a successful swimmer because your feet are like fins and your lung capacity is bigger than the average person. But I'm guessing there's something else. He said, oh, yes, John. When I was younger, my coach said to me, Michael, are you willing to work out on Sundays? Yes, coach. Great. We just got 52 more workouts than the competition. So the takeaway for everybody is, if you want to be the Olympic champion in your career, whether it's an architect, a lawyer, a tech salesperson, a speaker. What are you willing to do that other people aren't? It doesn't necessarily have to mean working harder. It could just be coming up with something that other people haven't thought about or aren't willing to do.
I remember a famous cyclist was asked about whether he liked cycling in the rain. And he said, I love cycling in the rain because I can't stop laughing. And they said, and the interviewer said, why are you laughing when you're cycling in the rain? He says, because I know my competition aren't out today.
Yes, that's it.
And it's about having that it's that competitive advantage, isn't it?
It really is. And listening is a competitive advantage. In fact,
yes.
I say that soft skills make you strong. And a lot of people's brains go, wait, how can something soft make you strong? So I define soft skills as listening, empathy, and storytelling. When you combine those three soft skills together with your hard skills are, I'm an architect, I'm a lawyer, I know the tech business, whatever it is, that's what makes you the Olympic champion. You're a better listener. Yeah.
I think that's great, John. I think that listening, which is hearing and not sitting there going, what am I going to say next?
Exactly.
Which is what a lot of people do. The empathy of actually tuning into a person and understanding them and having that EQ, and not just trying to push your opinions on it and then telling stories. I think that's awesome.
Thanks.
So John, in the last 4 minutes,
yes,
I actually want you to tell me a story.
Brilliant.
Which is on your website. You have met a whole bunch of very famous people, haven't you?
Yes, I have had that privilege.
So why don't you tell us the story about when you met? So I can't remember, isn't it the interviewer,
Larry King.
Larry King, yeah. When you met Larry King.
Yes, I was introduced to him by a mutual friend, and I was going to be interviewed on his show. It was called Breakfast with Larry, and I knew that I had to be at the top of my game. Larry King interviewed over 60,000 people, presidents, athletes, celebrities, you name it. And so I started reading up on him because I think the more prepared we are, the more confident we are.
Yeah.
And I realized that he hated small talk. And so I read a little bit about his big break. And it turns out in his autobiography mentions that he got to interview Frank Sinatra. And it's a fascinating story of Frank Sinatra's son had been kidnapped and no, he wasn't doing any interviews. And Jackie Gleason was a friend of Larry King's and got him the interview, and they clicked. And then, Frank invited Larry to bring a date to come hear him sing. And it was, this amazing night. And then Larry's taking his date home. And this is, way before ATMs and credit cards and all that stuff in the 60s were being used. And the woman said, oh, let's stop and get some coffee for tomorrow morning. And he didn't have any money and he was too embarrassed to say. And so he goes into the store and comes back out and she goes, where's the coffee? And he goes, oh, they couldn't change 100 to keep the vibe going. And I just thought that was an adorable story. So before we went on camera, I mentioned to Larry how much I loved that story. And he said, oh yeah, that was a good night. So when Larry King asked me what makes a good story, I said, would you mind sharing that story of how you got your break? And then we can break it down into the 4 parts of exposition, problem, solution, and resolution. And so we did that. And it was a charming interaction because I got him involved in telling his own story and then helping everybody watching the interview. Because again, the resolution to that story is not that Frank Sinatra gave him the interview and that helped his career, but that resolution part of him keeping the vibe going to impress the girl, of saying, oh, they couldn't break 100 is what makes that story charming and fun.
It's a great story. And it's you've got some great photos on your website of when you met him, and it's such a fantastic opportunity for you.
Well, sometimes you're life exceeds your dreams. You know, watching him growing up as a kid, it never in my mind did I put down, let's get Larry King to interview me. You know, that was never a goal. So when those kinds of things happen, it's wonderful.
John, thank you so much for coming on and talking today, and for putting up and working with the technicalities of stuff.
My pleasure.
And it's been a wonderful walk through storytelling and really getting into the detail of it, and enabling people, giving people the insight to actually break down stories for themselves. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
Just go to my website, johnlivesay.com, or Google The Pitch Whisperer.
And if you go to John's website, there's some great videos. There's all the stuff about him. It's a great place and resource to find more about John and what he does. John, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
And I am feeling
Energized.
more energy than
Fantastic.
when I came in.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you.